Hey, my friends, what's going on? This is the Art of Prepping. Just wanted to talk about 10 tips today to help extend your bug out bag. And this is kind of in response to a few blog and websites that have posted some information which I feel like is very lacking and not efficient in its philosophy. And more so, I think it's just a very poor display of information that you could come up with on your own. And I think a lot of people don't think through information when they put things up. And I'm not perfect by any means. I know I've put things up on this channel that weren't the most interesting of things to put up. But I try to be practical. And sometimes practical isn't always like amazing. And so might be one of those videos. But regardless, though, I'm here to just tell you that be careful when you're out looking for information about preparedness. In my personal opinion, over the decades, I think well over half, once again, well over half of the information out there is either regurgitations or misinformation. And I mean that maybe they don't have the intention to misinform you, but the information really isn't good. It's not based on anything real. It's typically just made up. And so there's a lot of philosophies that aren't proven. And there's a lot of different approaches to solve problems that don't actually work in real life. So just be careful. And these tips, this is once again a response to a few blog and website postings that really were just pathetic. And these were very large channels that got picked up and shared by a lot of people. And people think that this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's really sad to see very almost like juvenile level information being passed around as if it's that great, when the information really isn't useful. And if anything, it just creates a less efficient means to be prepared. So just use your common sense once again. Now, the first tip I want to share is, and this is once again very simple, but it doesn't get talked about much. It's conservation. Now, if you're trying to extend any type of kit system, one of the first ways you can, look at this problem, if you will, is to conserve what you already have instead of adding more stuff. People just default in thinking that you just have to have a lot more stuff to extend the time frame of anything. And that's not always the case. In some cases, it is. Sometimes you just need more water or you just need more food. You just can't get around that. But in some cases, you can just conserve what you already have. The second tip is to use more multi-use items. So many times I see people just pick things that can only do one type of activity or solve one type of problem. And I'm here to tell you that we don't need to be that close-minded. A lot of people ask me through private messaging, what are the best tools and what are the best this and that are multi-use in application. I'm here to tell you that you have to investigate this yourself. This is something that not everybody can tell you what to do. And I think that's a bigger problem as well in this genre, that especially for the newer people, they're just wanting other people to tell them what to do, what to buy, and what to learn. And they're not doing the exploratory part themselves. They're not creating a journey. They're just kind of following the path from others. And sometimes those paths lead to hardship and despair because they're rooted or there's no foundation to really give you results that you desire. The next tip is lightweight items. I can't sometimes say this enough. So many times I hear people talk about, my backpack is too heavy. What is the problem? Well, you got things in there that add up. You might have a lot of very small things, but sometimes these things in volume really do add up to a weight that's not manageable. So it may not be just one or two bulky items that need to go. It might be consolidating, once again, a handful of small items that add up to several pounds that can be trimmed by just maybe replacing with one item. So you just gotta constantly look at bulk and weight. The next tip would be to consider more reusable and renewable items. One example would be like solar power. They have those very small, collapsible, folding solar panels. So you can charge your batteries or any electronics. That just would be a very comprehensive, in my opinion, in most environments. A solution that could be right there and it doesn't weigh very much and it doesn't take up much space. You could obviously carry extra batteries, and there's other ways to power your systems. There's hand crank systems and things you could consider, but the solar power option in most locations, I mean, obviously if you're up in the Arctic and there's like weeks, if not months of darkness, that's not going to be a viable option. But you got to look at things that can be reusable and renewable. Tip number 5 is look at other ways to gather nutrition and calories besides just adding more power bars or something like that, or MREs or any of that junk to your kit. You want to get away from that anyways. You don't want junk food. So if you have to bring extra food, look at high nutritional values and high caloric output foods. So basically dense foods. And also look at ways to procure food in your environment, maybe through fishing or trapping or through foraging. So getting to know the layout of the land and what's in the land right there minimizes what you have to carry and put in your bag. Tip number 6 is to include something more substantial than just a Mylar space blanket. I've been seeing a lot of channels that say that's pretty much all you need for a bug out. And it's very possible in some climates that could get you through a couple of days. But most likely, if you're going to spend multiple nights out in the exposed environment, you're going to want more than just a Mylar space blanket that could break or tear in the first night. So you might want to consider something that is more durable, like a breathable type of bivy sack, maybe like a sportsman bivy. There's a lot of things out there. Even a very lightweight tarp system or a hammock system would be superior in most situations over a space blanket. So you're going to have to look at that as a real option that you have to kind of seek a little bit more information about. There's a lot of people who just think they can just put a 99-cent Mylar blanket in their bag and they're good to go, and it's just really not enough. The next tip is to add more money. In case you do come across a location that has resources, you can possibly buy some additional items you may need at that time. So if you need a few extra days extension on your bag, maybe include a couple $100 extra just in case something happens. You'd probably want to do that in small bills, you know, maybe 1s and 5s, maybe 10s at the most, but just to have some cash. That's just common sense, in my opinion. Tip number 8 is to have an extra change of clothing. If you're going to be out in the elements longer, there's a higher probability that your clothes will get dirty or damp or really wet. They could be soaking wet, and that could be a big threat toward your well-being. Also, you may want to change your clothing to match different types of environments. So you may want to have different color clothing and some clothing that's more insulated than others so that you have an option to change into different clothes depending on the temperature. And so this is something to consider, you know, and it doesn't have to be like heavy clothing. It could be stuff that could be lighter in weight. But just to have at least an extra change of clothing I think it's common sense. Tip number 9 is not so much to bring additional water with you, but to at least have a collapsible water container that if you need to add more water to your supplies, you can. So this is going to be on top of what you already have, which of course would presuppose that you already have a good and decent water filter. So having extra water, maybe an extra ½ gallon to a gallon on you is just going to really add a lot of weight. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that it's close to 8.3 pounds per gallon of water. And so if you already have a liter or two on you, to add a lot more than that, it's just not going to make a lot of sense unless you're talking about bugging out in a desert or something. So it's not so much you need like extra water with you. It's just having the means to actually carry it if you wanted to, or at least to put it in storage so you can just set it aside. So if you're going to be, let's say, for example, in one location for a majority of the bug out, and you can go to a certain distance and find a water source instead of having to travel that constantly back and forth to get back to base camp. For whatever reason, that's what you need to do because your base camp is the more practical location versus where the water is. Then it makes a lot of sense to have an extra container that you could just bring to fill up instead of making either multiple trips a day or every day having to go to the water source, which may be even potentially miles away. So you could really increase your efficiency and conservation of calories by having an extra container just to haul water so that you can stay put and conserve. And lastly, tip number 10 is about hygiene. If you're going to stay out and do anything at a longer time frame, you're going to want to have the ability to keep yourself clean and sanitize yourself. And so it could be something as simple as having an additional bottle of maybe hand sanitizer, alcohol-based hand sanitizer, or maybe it's something like wet wipes. It doesn't have to be very complicated here. And so just having a few extra things, it could be a bar soap, but just having a few extra capabilities to extend keeping yourself clean in a very efficient fashion is going to just make sense as well. I hope this actually brings you a little bit of order to the chaos out there. And when you read these blogs and websites that kind of seem to be overly simplistic, or they make it off as like, oh, you just don't really need much, or you need these certain types of things and you can't live without them, it should be red flags right off the bat that something's not right. And so just be very, this is how I do it. I'm very critical about what I read in a respectful manner. I just assume that everybody has good intentions when they write things about preparedness, but unfortunately, there's a lot of bad information once again. And so you just kind of have to filter through all the nonsense to get to the good stuff. And so I just wanted to make this response video because it was bothering me that I found, different sources saying things that weren't really based on facts. And you can obviously tell when people have never even gone hiking when they make recommendations that are really not based in reality. And I think a lot of times there's websites that just pick up on this genre of preparedness just to sell stuff, just to be totally blunt about it. They get different links to Amazon and they try to make a commission. And the things that I've recommended on this channel are legitimate. They're based in reality and they're of very high quality and value. Otherwise, I would never even mention it. And so just be careful out there. Not everyone has your best in mind. And it's sad to say, there's a lot of people that just want to make some money, some quick money, and go on with it. And they don't really care about the repercussions. But I and many other people do. And so just keep an eye out for those who do have your best in interest, because I think that's where you can grow. And I'm always trying to revise my list of influences in my life. Because I always want to make sure that I'm not falling trap for the pitfalls that some people are actually posing to us that actually have genuine interest to be prepared. So I wish you all the best, and I'll catch you soon.